often gets depicted as the ideal family is sort of the Leave It to Beaver or Ozzie and Harriet, these sort of 1950s families where the husband went to work, mom would stay home and take care of the children, and sort of the white picket fence, and you owned your own home. What's interesting about Kunz's study is that she points out what we call the anomaly of the 1950s family. So let's look at sort of statistical picture of the 1950s family. Rates of divorce are half of what they are today. It was a child-centered family. Birth rate was extremely high. We had 3 to 4 children as opposed to 2 to 3 today. And gross national product increased by 250% and the per capita income by 35%. There was an increase in single-family home ownership. 62% of all families own their own homes. 85% of new homes were built in the suburbs. 61% increase in salaried workers. 60% of all families were considered middle class. By 1960, 87% of families had a TV, 75% owned a car, and discretionary income doubled during the 1950s. Nuclear family consumption, including household furnishing and appliances, climbed 240%. So this sort of statistical picture shows that the 1950s was an unusual decade. So no time before and no time after would we see these kinds of statistics. So the first time in 100 years, the age for marriage and motherhood fell, fertility increased, divorce rates declined, and women achieved educational parity with men jobs. All of which corresponds with a government that could afford to be generous with educational benefits, housing loans, highway and sewer construction, and job training, a context in which employment was steady. So when people paint this sort of nostalgic picture of the family, what they're usually referencing is a time of like economic well-being, very healthy, sustainable economic picture that we really haven't seen, again, before that and after that. So there's sort of a distortion then of looking just at the 1950s. There was something very unusual about this decade, primarily because of the war and the way that we were able to benefit from rebuilding Europe. So the nuclear family, to the extent to which the nuclear family was solidified and praised was particular to the 1950s. So thereafter and before, this was not the case. Family became sort of a place of self-fulfillment, self-image, and self-worth. And we see a family as a focal place of fun, recreation, and became the symbol of the American dream. So I think what Kunz is trying to argue here is when you talk about the family, make sure that you use a larger scale than, say, just 50 years, usually 100 years to give you a more fair picture of what the family looked like. So prior to 1950s, divorce was on the incline. Then you hit 1950s and it goes to an all-time low, and then it steadily climbs back up. So you can see that with any sort of change in the family, that there's going to be a significant switch in the 1950s, but then they'll kind of go back to the way it was after the decade is over. And she also points out the other 1950s family, which is that there were a certain sector in the American population that did not benefit from the 1950s. 25% of American families were poor, especially above the age of 65. Minorities were by and large excluded from the American dream. So this is actually, primarily white families that are part of this statistical picture. They experienced extreme forms of discrimination and segregation. Women in some cases were forced back into the home. They didn't necessarily want to stay at home, but they lost their job. Many women did not want to lose up or give up their wage and were greatly unhappy in domestic life. And those who did not take up responsibilities as wife and mother were extremely stigmatized. Likewise, men were forced into breadwinning roles in professional ambition, regardless of their personal preference, due to marrying and to working. So maybe, men didn't necessarily want to go to work. Maybe they wanted to stay at home. But you had these sort of strict rules of what was appropriate for men and women. The 1950s was also during a cultural context of communism, the Red Scare. And you also saw an enormous increase in family-related violence and marital unhappiness. A quarter to a third of all families experienced some form of violence. or marital unhappiness.